Good afternoon, everybody. That's loud up here. Oh my God. I couldn't hear Jesse, but I can hear me. Goodness gracious. It is indeed an honor and privilege to be with you this afternoon as we celebrate industry in Caldwell County and what all of our business partners mean to this community. It's a great day, and I'm glad to be back and doing this again after a couple of years hiatus there. So, certainly our thoughts are with Ashley, also with the Barlow family, but Disney seems to be magical in the way that it spreads COVID. It seems like everybody who goes there comes back with COVID. But our thoughts are with Ashley as she recovers. I do want to take just a minute to recognize my colleagues and fellow Economic Development Advisory Committee members. If you are on the EDAC, as we call it, would you please stand and let us show our appreciation for all you do for economic development in Caldwell County. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for being here today. Appreciate all of your support of our business partners in Caldwell County. It is now my honor to introduce to you our first speaker today, Mr. Austin Rouse. Mr. Rouse is the Director of Business Recruitment for the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, overseeing the team of statewide business recruitment managers, as well as leading and directing the organization's effort to attract new businesses to North Carolina. He joined EDPNC in 2015, working as a research analyst, then transitioning to working as a business recruitment manager in 2018, and was a senior member of the team focusing on automotive projects prior to his current role. Austin is a native of Kinston and is a double Tar Heel, earned his bachelor's degree in public policy and political science and a master's of public administration from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. If you will, please join me in welcoming Mr. Austin Rouse.
So good afternoon. Pleasure to be with you. Things that is missing from my bio, for some of you that may know the state of North Carolina well. Kinston, so I'm a native of Lenoir County, so I feel like I'm a companion when I'm in Lenoir. A few times that people always ask you, hey, you're from Lenoir, and then they reference something in Caldwell County or something in the western part of the state. So excited to be here with you all today and provide a little brief update about what we're seeing as far as state activity and sort of some trends from the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. So with that, for those that are unfamiliar, our organization was founded in 2014, and so we are coming up on our 10-year anniversary, which we're really excited about and glad to have been a strong partner of many of you in the room and across the state in helping to accelerate the state's overall trajectory that we think is in a very good position as I sit here today in front of you. So a few of our sort of divisions that we have, obviously I'm on the business recruitment team, but we have our tip of the spear, our sales team, our business development team, which is 4 or 5 team members, and we also have several foreign offices that we have across Europe, several in Asia, and so enable us to be positioned well to work globally for opportunities. And I'll dive in a little bit more what we're seeing from a foreign direct investment standpoint in the state. We also have an existing industry team that obviously many of you know, Bill Slade in the room, who oversees that team for the state. And then also small business team, international trade team, tourism, and most recently I'll dive into a little bit around a new division that we're standing up, which is product development, which is a direct result of the larger projects and many of the more complex things that we're seeing in recent years. As far as just overall activity coming in that's trying to locate facilities. So one thing that we're really proud of is that back-to-back years, we as a state have been named the best top state for business by CNBC. You'll see folks across the spectrum that are really excited and proud of this recognition that we've been able to receive in back-to-back years, and just really further solidify how far the state has sort of come along over the past 10 years since our organization has been founded. I'll sort of position here sort of a high level of what we're seeing across the state. And so for background, as Dr. Porch referenced, I oversee our business recruitment team, so primarily focused on new companies and what they're looking for at a high level. I'll go through a few items here from the state perspective. Obviously, excited to spend some time with the Caldwell County team this afternoon, getting a little bit more familiarity with some of the site options and things you all are working on and investing in your community that we'll be excited to be able to market to potential clients on our end. But at a high level, we've seen unprecedented interest in the state in recent years. You can see here sort of the volume, the amount of projects overall that we have come to us where essentially a company has firm plans where they would like to move forward somewhere and North Carolina gets put on their list. And so around 400 odd projects, you'll see of those, around 80% of those are new projects and 20 are existing companies that are contemplating expanding and expanding where they're at within the state. Here's probably the most interesting nugget. It's funny that you all referenced this the first time you've sort of met since 2020 as a group for this type of event. That's what I'd say is a really inflection point for what we've seen as far as new companies looking at the state. The types of projects has really changed over the past 3 or 4 years, and let me explain that to you at a high level. Prior to 2020, this graphic would you'd probably see around 30% of that would be office-oriented projects. So companies that are looking to have some type of major form of operations in a Charlotte, a Raleigh, maybe contemplating Greensboro. Those projects, for the most part, are a much, much smaller portion of what we're seeing on a daily basis with companies that have an interest in the state. Obviously, the overall office environment, remote work, mixture of how companies are trying to approach that in recent years has just really put a damper on that being a significant part of our project pipeline. With that, we've also seen a major increase, obviously, across the country in manufacturing, a lot of investment, sort of unparalleled in recent memory, as far as just the overall volume and the deal size of manufacturing. That's represented in our pipeline here, where it's approximately 80 to 85% manufacturing projects. So that's something that we've seen consistently since 2021. I think we'll continue to see that. And that's also really accelerated by much of what I would describe as the federal industrial policy that's occurred over the past few years. Think the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the CHIPS Act related to semiconductors, the Inflation Reduction Act. These are a lot of things that are helping to accelerate. A lot of times companies having plans, but being able to move forward their plans potentially quicker. And that gets into sort of, overall what we're seeing as far as the types of volume, traditional size of our projects. Here's just a brief overview of some of those major categories, the major things that we sort of capture, and the typical deal size we see for some of these projects. So I'll just draw to your attention here. Those 80-something projects that are manufacturing, they traditionally come with around 170 jobs, 50 million investment, and traditionally mid-50s as far as salaries they're willing to pay for overall average wage. So that sort of gives you a good indication of the traditional project that we're seeing being worked by our team. Building off of as far as what I was saying concerning sort of overall industrial activity, here's sort of the leading sectors that we're seeing activity across the board. So automotive and energy or by far you can see our leading sectors right now. Prior to 2020, they would have been probably more midway through the list. It probably would have been anywhere from 10 to 20 projects that we saw like on an annual basis. So, but just as you read those new articles, you have a lot of companies located in the state and probably within this region in those sectors. That's part of a larger trend that we're seeing where those sectors are really accelerating their investments, and we're getting a chance to compete for those opportunities as a state. And then you also see, in addition to those two sort of leading, continue a lot of activity in the food, beverage, or agricultural space. Chemicals and plastics, we continue to see a lot of activity supporting some of the heavier industrial projects that we're seeing in the EV sector specifically. A lot of activity in life sciences as well. We're seeing more of that spread throughout the state, which we're excited about. And then, aerospace and textiles, we're still seeing a good number of those projects on an annual basis. So that just gives you a quick sense of what that activity looks like. And there's just sort of a further, deeper dive of, depending upon the specific industry, what are the traditional jobs, investment, and wages associated with some of those projects. So overall, I'll just note here, probably pay particularly close attention to the automotive and energy, because those are traditionally really high investment projects. And that's where we've seen a really uptick in those projects in the state. The nature of this project, one thing also that I'll say, it's been a really inflection point for us as well. Sort of coming out of COVID is that in 21 and even going into early 22, the companies they were working with that were foreign clients, they were really limited in their ability to access and travel the U.S. So that really impacted our project pipeline. So what we've seen in particular the past few years, it's really increased the number of foreign direct investment projects that we get, and I'll dive into like where we're seeing the most activity in the next slide, as far as what countries those opportunities represent, and most often we're dealing with, it might be leadership in the home country, it might be their North American presence that we're working through primarily. But big picture wise, the number of international companies is close to 50%. In COVID, that was probably closer to 15 and 20%. So we've seen an opening up of the economy that's really provided benefits, thus seeing increased activity internationally, and us being able to compete for a lot of those projects and been successful in some cases. So here's just for the most recent year, in 2023, where most of that activity was centered around. I'll flag China for a minute because obviously that's constantly in the news, but sort of the next 3 to 5 are probably where we've seen the most activity consistently over the past 5 years as a state. And these are traditional strong areas for foreign direct investment for the state. Germany, Italy, Korea, Canada, and Japan. I'll particularly note Japan because we're going to be fortunate enough to have the Prime Minister of Japan visit the state this week. So we're excited about that. It just goes to the strong ties that we continue to see, particularly with them, and the most direct result of that has been our efforts with the Toyota battery North America, just south of Greensboro, having plans to invest in upwards of $12 to $13 billion as a state, as a company in the state. So we're really excited about that, but I think it just goes consistently. We have strong ties. We have a pretty diverse group of countries that have strong interest in the state. But one thing I'll say from a trend perspective, since China's sort of leading the list, China is one of those where from probably 2017 to 22, we saw really no interest at all from the state. Basically, that spigot was turned off. A lot of that was related to tariff policy, trade policy, just sort of at odds. And increasingly, a lot of those companies in the EV space and energy space, that's traditionally been a very strong sector over the past 10 years that the Chinese government has put a lot of time, energy, and investment into, and we're seeing them try to come back and locate within North Carolina. So that's sort of why you see that number being so high, is because they're essentially trying to move as quickly as possible because they have a lot of background and strong ability within those particular sectors. But really interesting, a lot of those projects are really hard to locate, and across the country you're seeing certain states taking a case-by-case basis to how they interact with those companies, or completely cutting on the stick and not allowing them to move forward. So, interesting to say, geopolitics was not part of my job at all 2 years ago. It's now a significant part of my job. So, fun times for us. Taking a quick step back to give you a sense of what we're dealing with as far as, hey, what type of requests, what are the companies ultimately asking for? Because ultimately they have to have a real estate location to locate in. So like, what's the nature of the real estate that they're requesting? Here it gives you at a high level some meaningful data that we try to collect in regards to, hey, are they looking for a building, a site, or are they open to either? And here you can sort of see that information based on historical data. So we're increasingly seeing companies that are from two years ago that are more willing to consider it a site. That's because it's much more difficult, as probably you all know, to have really good viable industrial buildings in the community, and given the strength of the economy overall the past 10 years, just a lot of those opportunities are pretty limited. So people are having to stretch what they're willing to consider. Specifically, they want to meet certain markets due to customers on their end. So here's just a little bit more deeper dive of typically what the square footage is associated with those opportunities that we get requests for. So you can see here a broad cross section of what their square footage needs are and sort of what they're requesting from us. And similarly with acreage. This sort of underscores for us, we've stood up a product development division at the EDPNC. That's sort of working closely with the legislature and executive leadership to figure out, hey, with the major real estate requests, we've never as a state proactively really invested time and effort to put an initiative behind identifying new sites across the state. So we are in the process of doing that. That got started with the mega site program 2 years ago, we're now moving to the next phase, which is a select sites program. So think mega sites, 1,000 plus acres. You're essentially looking for unicorns in the state that are well suited and have all the necessary infrastructure compared to select sites, which are less than 1,000 acres. And we sort of have some direction from the General Assembly where they'd like to see that spread out geographically, which we're excited about, and also some limitations on like no more than 100 acres, no more than 500 acres. So we're actively working through that process. And I think for us, it will enable the state to be more competitive for the next generation of projects and the types of projects that we're seeing across the state, to sort of reflect what we've been seeing in the marketplace and what we continue to expect in the marketplace. Because for the U.S., those sectors that I highlighted that are leading, we expect those to continue to lead for 5 years, 10 years out in the future. And we just want to make sure as a state that we remain competitive and have the available real estate inventory for the short, medium, and long-term needs of the clients that we're seeing that hopefully will bring good paying jobs and good investment to the state. So needless to say, that's just a quick update of what we're seeing across the state. Glad to take any questions or afterwards, but I know we're all excited to see Ted and sort of his overall view of what's going on in the economy. So appreciate the time, everybody.